For centuries, chilling screams have echoed through shadowy forests. Under the full moon, victims ripped apart by creatures lurking in the darkness, their ferocity defying human comprehension. From medieval villages to quiet modern towns, the same terrifying nightmare unfolds. Glowing eyes in the night, blood-soaked claws, and a haunting howl that paralyzes the soul with dread. What were once dismissed as mere folklore are, in fact, blood-curdling true events recorded in history's darkest corners. These aren't just fairy tales. They are the terrifying real-life accounts of werewolf attacks that defy logic and fuel the deepest fears of humanity. Prepare for a journey into the spine-chilling truth behind the legends of werewolves' attacks that truly happened, leaving a trail of mystery, death, and an ever-growing legend of terror. As the moon rises and shadows stretch across the land, darker things stir, waiting to be uncovered. If you dare, subscribe, and step into a world where werewolves are not just legends. They've been seen, they're alive, and they're hunting. Hit the bell to stay updated on the terrifying truth behind the creatures that lurk in the night. Are you brave enough to uncover what hides in the darkness? The night is quiet, too quiet. Mist curls along the forest floor, like ghostly fingers searching for warmth. In the distance, something howls long, deep, and mournful, the kind of sound that makes even the bravest man feel suddenly very small. It's a sound older than language itself. A sound that has haunted human memory since we first huddled around fire to keep the darkness away. No one knows when the first werewolf attack happened, but every culture, from the frozen north to the burning sands, tells of something that hunts between worlds. A creature, not man, not beast, but both. In the flicker of a torchlight, it was always there, in the stories of missing shepherds, mutilated corpses, and footprints that shifted from paw to heel. Tonight, we step into that shadow. Our story begins in the small villages of medieval Europe, where superstition ruled as strongly as any king. Peasants feared what lived beyond their walls: wolves, witches, and those cursed to become one of them. It wasn't just folklore. Records survive court documents, execution lists, testimonies written in trembling ink describing men and women who claimed to have transformed into wolves and committed unspeakable acts. To them, the howl in the dark wasn't a legend, it was a warning. In 1521, in the quiet French countryside, villagers found livestock slaughtered, bodies half-eaten, and bloody tracks leading back toward town. The people whispered of loup-garous werewolves. Panic spread like wildfire. They locked their doors, sharpened their blades, and prayed that dawn would come quickly. But the killings continued. When the killers were finally caught, Michel Verdun, Pierre Bergot, and Philibert Montot, their confessions chilled, even hardened inquisitors. They spoke of meeting a dark figure in the woods, of being given a salve that turned their skin to fur, their teeth to fangs. They said they hunted beneath the moon's light, driven by hunger beyond reason. The men were executed, burned alive, but the attacks didn't stop. So what then was truly happening? Were these men mad, possessed, or had something else taken them, something far older than Christianity or reason? From that moment on, Europe would live in terror of the werewolf. Every howl became a death sentence. Every missing child, every slaughtered animal, another sign that the curse had spread. The chronicles say that the priests tried to bless the forests, but the trees only whispered louder. Hunters claimed to see eyes that glowed red in the dark, not reflections, but awareness, watching, waiting. And as centuries passed, the legend of the werewolf grew teeth of its own, because the truth was far more terrifying than the myth. Sometimes, the monster wasn't out there in the woods. It was inside us all along. Long before medieval Europe trembled beneath the full moon, an ancient story was already warning mankind about the curse of transformation, a tale so old it predates written history. It began not in fog-draped villages, but beneath the blazing sun of ancient Greece, where myth and truth often walked hand in hand. The earliest known account of a man becoming a wolf comes from the legend of King Lycaon of Arcadia, a ruler both feared and respected. According to the historian Ovid, Lycaon tested the gods themselves. To see if Zeus was truly divine, he served the god a meal made from human flesh, the flesh of his own son. Enraged by such blasphemy, Zeus struck the king with thunder and transformed him into a wolf, condemning him to roam the wilds, half man, half beast, a reflection of his monstrous soul. That story, told and retold for centuries, was more than myth, it was a warning. In ancient Greece, becoming a wolf symbolized what happened when man abandoned his humanity. But over time, strange reports began to surface, whispers that some men didn't just imagine transformation, they lived it. Philosopher Pausanias wrote of secret Arcadian rituals, where chosen men drank from a sacred lake and were said to turn into wolves for 9 years. If they abstained from human flesh during that time, they could return to their human form. If not, they would remain beasts forever. Scholars dismiss this as symbolic, but there were too many similar accounts to ignore. Even the Roman naturalist Pliny the Elder wrote about a man named Demanitus, who transformed into a wolf, prowled the forest, and returned to his village years later, unchanged except for his eyes, which never lost their animal stare. What's chilling is how these stories mirror real reports. Centuries later, accounts of men claiming to wake up covered in blood, unable to remember what they had done, haunted by dreams of hunting under the moonlight. Some confess to feeling bones shift beneath their skin, to hearing their own hearts beat like a growl. Were these myths merely metaphors for guilt and savagery, or ancient observations of something mankind could never fully explain? Archaeologists in Arcadia have uncovered wolf bones buried alongside human remains, as if ancient priests had tried to contain something unnatural. And inscriptions suggest that the name Lycaon, from which we get the word lycanthropy, was not just a story, but a warning etched in stone. To the ancients, the line between man and beast was dangerously thin, and every full moon, that line blurred. They believed that under the right curse, the right ritual, or the right rage, a man could shed his skin and reveal the predator beneath. The legend of Lycaon wasn't the beginning of superstition, it was the first recorded transformation. And it would not be the last. Arcadia, the wild mountainous heart of ancient Greece, was said to be a land untouched by time. Its forests were deep, its shadows endless, and its people lived closer to nature than any others in the known world. But nature, in Arcadia, was not gentle. It was primal. It was hungry. For centuries after King Lycaon's curse, villagers whispered that the land itself was still haunted by his presence. Shepherds swore they could hear the cries of wolves that sounded almost human. Travelers vanished along forest paths, their belongings scattered, their bodies never found. And when the moon rose high over Mount Lycaon, strange lights flickered between the trees, as if something ancient stirred again. Ancient Greek writers didn't dismiss these tales as superstition. They documented them. They called it the Lycaea, a sacred festival held to honor Zeus on the very mountain where Lycaon was struck down. But this was no ordinary celebration. Witnesses described secret rites where a chosen man would remove his clothes, swim across a lake known as the Waters of Arcadia, and emerge changed. Some accounts say the chosen one would vanish into the forest for years. Others claim they saw wolves circling the lake the next morning, one of them walking on 2 legs. Roman historian Pausanias, writing centuries later, told of men who took part in the Lycaea and lived to speak of it. One man, after 9 years in exile as a wolf, returned human once more, but his eyes glowed with an unnatural light. He avoided mirrors, he avoided meat, he avoided the moon. The people of Arcadia believed these transformations weren't curses, but divine punishments, a reflection of human sin. Yet the attacks continued. Flocks were slaughtered, villagers were found, mauled, and sometimes bones would appear near the old altars. The line between ritual and murder began to blur. It was as though the curse of Lycaon had infected the land itself, the soil, the wind, the blood of its people. Modern archaeologists have unearthed wolf skulls at Mount Lycaon, buried in ceremonial pits beside human bones. Whether they were sacrifices or something darker, no one can say. But the stories passed down through generations remain consistent. A shape that ran faster than any wolf, with eyes that burned like fire. A predator that struck without mercy, leaving behind tracks that ended in human footprints. The villagers came to call it Therion Lycaon, the Beast of Arcadia. Even today, under the ruins of ancient temples, strange howls echo through the mountains. Hikers have reported feeling watched, their camps torn apart in the night. Scientists claim it's wolves. Locals shake their heads. Because in Arcadia, the legend never died. The curse of the beast still breathes among the pines. And when the moon is full, they say, Lycaon himself still hunts. Long before medieval Europe trembled beneath the full moon, an ancient story was already warning mankind about the curse of transformation, a tale so old it predates written history. It began not in fog-draped villages, but beneath the blazing sun of ancient Greece, where myth and truth often walked hand in hand. The earliest known account of a man becoming a wolf comes from the legend of King Lycaon of Arcadia, a ruler both feared and respected. According to the historian Ovid, Lycaon tested the gods themselves. To see if Zeus was truly divine, he served the god a meal made from human flesh, the flesh of his own son. Enraged by such blasphemy, Zeus struck the king with thunder and transformed him into a wolf, condemning him to roam the wilds, half man, half beast, a reflection of his monstrous soul. That story, told and retold for centuries, was more than myth, it was a warning. In ancient Greece, becoming a wolf symbolized what happened when man abandoned his humanity. But over time, strange reports began to surface, whispers that some men didn't just imagine transformation, they lived it. Philosopher Pausanias wrote of secret Arcadian rituals, where chosen men drank from a sacred lake and were said to turn into wolves for 9 years. If they abstained from human flesh during that time, they could return to their human form. If not, they would remain beasts forever. Scholars dismiss this as symbolic, but there were too many similar accounts to ignore. Even the Roman naturalist Pliny the Elder wrote about a man named Demanitus, who transformed into a wolf, prowled the forest, and returned to his village years later, unchanged except for his eyes, which never lost their animal stare. What's chilling is how these stories mirror real reports. Centuries later, accounts of men claiming to wake up covered in blood, unable to remember what they had done, haunted by dreams of hunting under the moonlight. Some confess to feeling bones shift beneath their skin, to hearing their own hearts beat like a growl. Were these myths merely metaphors for guilt and savagery, or ancient observations of something mankind could never fully explain? Archaeologists in Arcadia have uncovered wolf bones buried alongside human remains, as if ancient priests had tried to contain something unnatural. And inscriptions suggest that the name Lycaon, from which we get the word lycanthropy, was not just a story, but a warning etched in stone. To the ancients, the line between man and beast was dangerously thin, and every full moon, that line blurred. They believed that under the right curse, the right ritual, or the right rage, a man could shed his skin and reveal the predator beneath. The legend of Lycaon wasn't the beginning of superstition, it was the first recorded transformation. And it would not be the last. Far to the north, where winter never truly ends and forests stretch into eternity, a strange and haunting chapter in werewolf history unfolded. This is Livonia, the land that once lay between modern-day Latvia and Estonia. In the 16th and 17th centuries, it was a place steeped in pagan ritual, witchcraft, and fear of the unknown. But Livonia wasn't just haunted by tales. It was home to confessions. Real ones. In 1691, an old man named Thies of Kaltenbrunn stood before a court in Jürgensburg, accused of being a werewolf. He didn't deny it. In fact, he proudly proclaimed it. But what shocked the judges was his claim that he wasn't a servant of the devil, he was a warrior of God. Thies told the court that he and others like him left their bodies behind during certain nights of the year and became wolves. They would descend into hell itself, he said, to battle the servants of Satan and recover the stolen grain and livestock that evil spirits had taken from their land. He called himself a hound of God. The judges, convinced he was mad or possessed, demanded details. Thies described leading packs of werewolves armed with iron whips and blessed swords, fighting witches and demons in burning pits beneath the earth. He claimed that if the werewolves failed in their battles, famine would fall upon Livonia. His confession was detailed, vivid, and unwavering. He was punished, whipped publicly, but never executed. The court couldn't decide what terrified them more: his madness, or the possibility that he was telling the truth. But Thies was not the first. Records from the region describe earlier confessions, men and women who claimed to run with wolves during spirit nights. Villagers reported seeing entire packs of creatures racing across the snow, their howls echoing like war cries. Livonia's people believed these beings were real shapeshifters who could travel between worlds, protectors or destroyers, depending on their will. What makes these accounts unique is their consistency. Across decades, separate testimonies told nearly identical stories of transformation, of battle against dark forces, of returning to human form at dawn. Even the church's own investigators admitted the similarities were disturbing. Was this mass hysteria, or a cultural remnant of something ancient, a ritual older than Christianity, when warriors believed they could draw power from the wolf spirit? Archaeological findings hint at that very idea. In Livonia, burial sites contain wolf teeth, placed in the mouths of the dead, perhaps to grant them strength in the afterlife, or perhaps to keep them from rising again. Thies's case marked one of the last official werewolf trials in Europe. But his words left a lasting scar on history, a glimpse into a world where faith, fear, and the supernatural blended until no one could tell which was real. And as the snows covered Livonia's forests once more, villagers whispered that on certain nights they could still hear the howls of the hounds of God fighting battles unseen beneath the frozen earth. The year was 1764, and the rolling hills of Gévaudan in southern France were about to become the stage for one of history's bloodiest and most mysterious manhunts. It began with a scream. A young shepherd girl tending cattle near the village of Langoni was found torn apart. Her wounds were so vicious that even seasoned soldiers recoiled in horror. Locals whispered a single word: loup-garou werewolf. At first, the killings seemed like the work of wild wolves. But as the months passed, it became clear this was something else. The creature struck in broad daylight, targeting women and children. It ripped throats, crushed bones, and mutilated bodies with terrifying precision. Witnesses described a monster larger than any known wolf, with reddish fur, a massive head, and an almost human cunning in how it stalked its prey. Panic spread faster than the blood it spilled. Churches held nightly vigils. Villagers refused to leave their homes. The forests became silent, as though even the animals feared what lurked within. The newspapers called it La Bête du Gévaudan, the Beast of Gévaudan. King Louis XV, desperate to restore order, sent professional hunters and soldiers to kill the creature. Among them was Jean Chastel, a local farmer and veteran marksman, and the famed royal gun-bearer, François Antoine. Their hunts turned into bloody chaos, traps failed, huntsmen vanished, and still the beast fed. By the end of 1765, more than 100 people were dead. Eyewitnesses insisted the creature could not be a normal animal. Some claimed it stood on two legs. Others swore they saw it shrug off bullets. One survivor, Marie-Jeanne Vallet, who stabbed the beast with a spear, said she saw its face half man, half wolf. Royal hunters finally claimed victory when they killed a massive wolf, paraded through Paris as the infamous monster. The nation rejoiced until the killings started again. The true beast, whatever it was, continued to terrorize Gévaudan for 2 more years. Only after Chastel shot and killed another strange animal during Mass in 1767 did the attacks finally stop. This second beast was said to have human-like teeth and eyes that didn't look animal at all. Theories spread like wildfire. Some believed it was a mutant wolf, others a lion escaped from a nobleman's menagerie. But many locals were certain it had been a werewolf, perhaps even a man cursed by sin. The church called it divine punishment. To this day, the Beast of Gévaudan remains one of France's greatest unsolved mysteries. The forests where it hunted are still there, silent, endless, unchanged. And sometimes, travelers say they feel eyes on them as they pass through the mist. Because perhaps the beast was never slain. Perhaps it was never just one creature. Perhaps, in the heart of Gévaudan, the curse still hunts. In the late autumn of 1685, the German town of Ansbach found itself gripped by terror. Something was stalking the outskirts, something that left behind slaughtered livestock, mangled bodies, and paw prints too large to belong to any known wolf. It moved with intelligence, eluding traps, ignoring bait, and vanishing before hunters could even load their muskets. The townsfolk began to whisper that this was no ordinary beast. This was vengeance returned from the grave. The story began with the death of the town's hated mayor, a man known for his cruelty and greed. When he died suddenly, few mourned. But weeks later, a monstrous wolf appeared in the forests nearby. It attacked sheep, tore apart dogs, and then began preying on people. Panic consumed the region as rumors spread. The wolf was not an animal at all. It was the mayor reborn in monstrous form, come to torment those who had rejoiced in his death. Desperation turned to hysteria. Villagers armed themselves with pitchforks, silver bullets, and crosses. Church bells rang nightly to ward off evil. The priests led processions into the woods, praying loudly, but the killings only grew bolder. Eyewitnesses claimed the creature walked on its hind legs, its fur bristling like armor, its eyes reflecting red fire in the torchlight. Then, one bitter winter night, the hunters finally cornered it. The beast had slaughtered several sheep on the outskirts of town and lingered too long. Dozens of men surrounded it with torches and spears. The wolf snarled, lunged, and nearly broke free until a single musket shot rang out. The creature fell, twitching, its blood steaming against the snow. But what came next was even stranger. When the townspeople approached, they swore the beast's body looked disturbingly human. Its limbs seemed longer than a normal wolf's. Its eyes, still open, bore an expression of hatred, almost recognition. The people of Ansbach did what terrified humans have always done. When faced with something they don't understand, they made a spectacle of it. They dragged the corpse into town, hung it upside down in the square, and in a grotesque mockery dressed it in the dead mayor's clothes. They even placed a mask resembling the mayor's face over the creature's snout and paraded it through the streets to prove the curse had been broken. A strange calm fell over Ansbach after that day. The killing stopped, but unease lingered. Some said the creature's eyes followed them as it hung. Others claimed to hear scratching beneath the gallows at night, as though the wolf was trying to dig its way back up. Whether the wolf of Ansbach was a real animal, a serial killer, or something supernatural has never been settled. But one truth endures. The people of Ansbach didn't just kill a wolf. They buried their guilt, their fear, and perhaps the man they wronged beneath its skin. Of all the werewolf legends whispered across Europe, none is as chilling or as well documented as the story of Peter Stump, the so-called Werewolf of Bedburg. His case, recorded in 1589, is among the most horrifying examples of man and monster merging into one. And unlike most, it wasn't whispered in secret. It was shouted from the gallows. Bedburg, a quiet German village near Cologne, was plunged into fear when mutilated bodies began turning up in the fields, men, women, and even children torn apart by something both powerful and precise. The attacks came in waves. At first, villagers blamed wild wolves, but soon the killings took on a disturbing pattern. The creature seemed to select its victims. It struck close to homes, near roads, and sometimes in daylight. It wasn't hunting for food, it was hunting for pleasure. When the villagers finally organized a hunt, what they found defied explanation. One evening, a group of armed horsemen cornered what they thought was a large gray wolf near a dense thicket. But when they chased it down, the wolf vanished. In its place, they found Peter Stump, a local farmer known to be quiet and hard-working. His hands were bloody, and he carried a hunting knife. Under torture, Stump confessed to a story that still terrifies historians today. He claimed that from the age of 12, he had practiced the black arts, and that the devil himself had given him a magical belt made of wolfskin. When he fastened it around his waist, he said, he became a wolf stronger, faster, and filled with a hunger he could not control. Stump described hunting humans and livestock alike. He admitted to murdering and devouring over a dozen people, including his own son. His confessions were so detailed, so grotesque, that even his torturers begged him to stop speaking. But what makes this case truly disturbing is how calm he seemed. Stump spoke of his crimes as though he were recounting a hunt, not an atrocity. He said he could not resist the wolf's call, that once the transformation began, it was impossible to stop. Whether he truly believed in his curse or used it as an excuse for madness, no one could tell. The church declared him a servant of Satan. In October 1589, Peter Stump was executed in a manner designed to erase his evil from the world. He was strapped to a wheel, his flesh torn with red-hot pincers, his limbs broken, and finally beheaded. His head was placed on a spike, and beneath it, the villagers hung the figure of a wolf carved from wood, a warning to all who might walk the same path. But after his death, the killings did not stop. More mutilated animals appeared in nearby fields, and travelers spoke of glowing eyes in the darkness around Bedburg. Whether Peter Stump was truly a monster, or just a man driven to madness, his story endures for one reason. It forces us to ask what the real curse was, the devil's gift, or the beast that already lived inside him. Before the word werewolf ever reached the tongues of frightened villagers, Europe already had a name for the creature that lurked between man and beast, the wild man of the woods. He was older than Christianity, older even than the written word. Described in carvings, paintings, and myths across the continent, the wild man was a hairy, savage creature who lived deep in the forests, half human, half something else. By the Middle Ages, this ancient figure began crossing into reality. Records from the 13th and 14th centuries speak of wild men, captured by hunters or knights, beings covered in hair, speaking no language, and possessing strength beyond comprehension. They were said to tear apart livestock with bare hands, attack travelers, and howl like wolves under the moonlight. Some believed they were cursed humans. Others whispered that they were demons wearing human flesh. In 1341, a chronicle from the Pyrenees described a terrifying case. A group of shepherds claimed to have cornered a wild man after weeks of livestock mutilations. The creature, described as tall and covered in coarse hair, fled into a cave. When the villagers finally smoked it out, what stumbled into the light was neither beast nor man, a disfigured human, filthy, wild-eyed, and snarling. The men killed him out of fear, and when they examined the body, they swore his teeth were longer and sharper than any human should be. Centuries later, similar stories surfaced across Europe and Germany, France, and Poland. Some were likely feral humans, survivors of war or famine, who retreated into the wilderness. But others defied explanation. Witnesses described glowing eyes, speed beyond any man's, and howls that sent animals scattering. One of the most chilling accounts came from the forests of Bohemia in the early 1600s. Locals reported a creature that attacked travelers on the road between Prague and Pilsen. Those who escaped described a naked figure covered in matted hair, its movements disturbingly agile, its face a blur between human and beast. When hunters set traps, they found prints like a man's but elongated, clawed, and deep as if pressed by something far heavier. The church tried to label these beings as demonic, but folklore kept them alive in another form: Wodawos, Lessie, Sylvanus, names that merged man, nature, and monster into one. Many believed the wild men were guardians of the forest, punishing those who trespassed or disrespected nature. But when attacks turned bloody, faith quickly turned to fear. Over time, the image of the wild man transformed into something closer to the modern werewolf, the cursed man who lost his humanity to the beast within. Yet, unlike the wolf-man hybrids of later centuries, the wild man wasn't just a product of legend. He was seen, hunted, and feared by real people. Some historians suggest the wild man was born from our oldest fear, the reflection of what we once were. A primal echo of the time when humans were not yet rulers of the wild, but its prey. And perhaps, on nights when the wind moves through the trees like a whisper, that echo still answers back. Before the word werewolf ever reached the tongues of frightened villagers, Europe already had a name for the creature that lurked between man and beast, the wild man of the woods. He was older than Christianity, older even than the written word. Described in carvings, paintings, and myths across the continent, the wild man was a hairy, savage creature who lived deep in the forests, half human, half something else. By the Middle Ages, this ancient figure began crossing into reality. Records from the 13th and 14th centuries speak of wild men, captured by hunters or knights, beings covered in hair, speaking no language, and possessing strength beyond comprehension. They were said to tear apart livestock with bare hands, attack travelers, and howl like wolves under the moonlight. Some believed they were cursed humans. Others whispered that they were demons wearing human flesh. In 1341, a chronicle from the Pyrenees described a terrifying case. A group of shepherds claimed to have cornered a wild man after weeks of livestock mutilations. The creature, described as tall and covered in coarse hair, fled into a cave. When the villagers finally smoked it out, what stumbled into the light was neither beast nor man, a disfigured human, filthy, wild-eyed, and snarling. The men killed him out of fear, and when they examined the body, they swore his teeth were longer and sharper than any human should be. Centuries later, similar stories surfaced across Europe in Germany, France, and Poland. Some were likely feral humans, survivors of war or famine, who retreated into the wilderness. But others defied explanation. Witnesses described glowing eyes, speed beyond any man's, and howls that sent animals scattering. One of the most chilling accounts came from the forests of Bohemia in the early 1600s. Locals reported a creature that attacked travelers on the road between Prague and Pilsen. Those who escaped described a naked figure covered in matted hair, its movements disturbingly agile, its face a blur between human and beast. When hunters set traps, they found prints like a man's but elongated, clawed, and deep as if pressed by something far heavier. The church tried to label these beings as demonic, but folklore kept them alive in another form: Wodawoos, Lessie, Sylvanus, names that merged man, nature, and monster into one. Many believe the wild men were guardians of the forest, punishing those who trespassed or disrespected nature. But when attacks turned bloody, faith quickly turned to fear. Over time, the image of the wild man transformed into something closer to the modern werewolf, the cursed man who lost his humanity to the beast within. Yet, unlike the wolf-man hybrids of later centuries, the wild man wasn't just a product of legend. He was seen, hunted, and feared by real people. Some historians suggest the wild man was born from our oldest fear, the reflection of what we once were. A primal echo of the time when humans were not yet rulers of the wild, but its prey. And perhaps, on nights when the wind moves through the trees like a whisper, that echo still answers back. Of all the werewolf legends in history, none is more infamous or more mysterious than the Beast of Gévaudan. Between 1764 and 1767, this creature terrorized the rural province of Gévaudan in south-central France, leaving behind a trail of corpses, fear, and confusion. What began as whispers of a monstrous wolf soon became a nationwide panic and one of the bloodiest mysteries ever recorded. It started one summer morning in 1764. A young woman tending cattle near the village of Langon was attacked by a massive wolf-like creature. Her cattle defended her, and she survived to describe her attacker: a beast with reddish fur, a broad chest, and a massive head. Just weeks later, A 4-year-old girl was found dead, her throat ripped out, her body savaged. The killing spread like wildfire. Within months, dozens of victims, mostly women and children, were found across the countryside. Witnesses described the creature as larger than any wolf, moving with terrifying speed and seemingly unafraid of humans. Some swore it stood on 2 legs, others said it could not be killed. The people of Gévaudan began to whisper the word loup-garou werewolf. King Louis XV took notice. He dispatched professional wolf hunters, soldiers, and even noblemen to destroy the creature. Hundreds of wolves were killed, but the attacks continued. Panic turned into obsession. Priests called for prayer and penance, claiming the beast was divine punishment for sin. Hunters roamed the woods, armed with muskets and silver bullets. In 1765, a royal gun-bearer named Jean Chastel became a local hero. After months of relentless pursuit, Chastel claimed to have shot and killed the beast using a blessed silver bullet engraved with a cross. The attacks stopped temporarily, but by winter they began again. Some said Chastel had killed only one of several creatures. Others believed the beast could not die at all. By 1767, the killings finally ceased, leaving behind more than 100 dead and 49 wounded. But what exactly had plagued Gévaudan remains unsolved to this day. Modern historians and scientists have proposed countless theories. Some believe it was a large wolf or a hybrid, perhaps trained by humans. Others point to a hyena or escaped exotic animal brought from Africa. But the strangest theory of all suggests it wasn't an animal at all, but a man. Several accounts mention that the beast seemed to avoid attacking livestock, focusing only on humans. Some witnesses describe seeing a man with the creature, or claim that its fur resembled clothing rather than a pelt. It led to one haunting possibility, that the Beast of Gévaudan was a serial killer who used a trained animal or his own monstrous disguise to carry out his murders. Whatever it was, the beast became a legend. In the centuries that followed, the story of Gévaudan shaped France's image of the werewolf, part monster, part man, and entirely unstoppable. Even now, on misty nights in the forests of Lozère, locals say you can still hear it, a low growl rolling through the trees, as if the beast still hunts, waiting for another generation to forget the fear. In the heart of Renaissance Italy, amid whispers of witchcraft and heresy, there was one story that made even the most devout priests tremble: the tale of the Witch of Pavia and her army of wolves. It was said that in the late 1500s, a woman named Anna Collini from the city of Pavia was accused of commanding a pack of werewolves that terrorized the countryside. Her story became one of the most chilling examples of the dark union between witchcraft and lycanthropy. The first attacks began in 1573, when several shepherds were found mutilated outside the city walls. Witnesses reported seeing enormous wolves with glowing red eyes lurking near the victims. Unlike normal wolves, these creatures did not flee from torches or shouts. They stood their ground, growling as if defending their territory. Fear spread rapidly. The church sent inquisitors to investigate, and their attention soon turned toward Anna, a reclusive woman who lived alone on the outskirts of town. She was a midwife, herbalist, and rumored healer. But locals whispered that she could speak to animals, that she roamed the woods at night under the full moon, and that wherever she walked, wolves followed. When Anna was captured, the inquisitors found strange symbols etched into the stones of her cottage, along with dried herbs and bones arranged in circular patterns. Under interrogation, she denied being a witch, but admitted to calling the wolves. She claimed that the forest spirits protected her and that the animals were merely her companions. But under torture, her words changed. Anna confessed that she had made a pact with a shadowy figure she called Il Signore delle Bestie, the Lord of Beasts. He granted her the power to command wolves and to take their form when the moon was high. In exchange, she was to offer him the blood of those who trespassed on sacred ground. She described rituals performed beneath oak trees, where she and her children of the forest howled together until their bodies twisted into that of the wolf. Her confession sent shockwaves through Pavia. The Inquisition declared her guilty of witchcraft, lycanthropy, and murder. On the night of her execution, dozens gathered in the square to witness her burning. But just as the flames rose, a pack of wolves appeared at the edge of the crowd, howling in unison. Some claimed the animal's eyes gleamed like embers. Others swore one of them, a silver wolf, stared straight at Anna until she vanished into the smoke. After that night, the attacks ceased. For a time. Yet, over the next century, travelers passing through Pavia claimed to see a lone silver wolf near the ruins of Anna's cottage. When they tried to approach, it disappeared as if made of mist. The legend endures as a warning that the bond between human and beast, once sealed in blood, can never be undone. And sometimes, even death cannot silence the howl of a witch's wolves. In the 17th century, the region of Courland in present-day Latvia was gripped by fear. A string of gruesome murders plagued its quiet villages, and the victims were found torn to shreds, their bones splintered as if by the jaws of some unholy creature. Locals whispered of werewolves, and soon a name began to circulate in terrified tones. His real name was Hans Heintz, a butcher by trade, known for his skill with knives and his ability to dismember carcasses with surgical precision. For years he was an ordinary man, respected and hard-working, until one winter night changed everything. A child went missing near his shop. When her remains were found days later in the woods, something about the wounds horrified even the most hardened hunters. The flesh had been devoured. Panic swept through Courland. Wolves were blamed at first, but as the bodies piled up, the pattern became disturbingly human. Witnesses reported seeing a shadowy figure near the forests, walking on two legs one moment, vanishing into the brush the next. The killings always happened under the full moon. Eventually, suspicion fell on Hans. The villagers claimed they saw him wandering at night, his clothes soaked in mud, his eyes glassy and distant. When authorities searched his home, they found blood-stained rags, bones buried beneath the floorboards, and a collection of strange charms made from animal teeth. During interrogation, Hans denied the murders, but when he was pressed under torture, his story shifted. He confessed to meeting a black figure in the woods, a demon, he said, who had offered him the strength and hunger of a wolf. Desperate to survive a harsh winter, Hans accepted. The demon instructed him to wear a belt made of wolf hide and to drink blood beneath the moon. From that night on, he claimed, the transformation began. Hans described how his body would twist and break, how fur would tear through his skin, and how his mind would vanish into a haze of bloodlust. He spoke of waking up in the forest, his mouth filled with raw flesh, his hands slick with blood. He claimed to remember the screams, but not as a man, as the wolf. When his confession spread, the townspeople demanded his execution. But before the sentence could be carried out, Hans begged for one final wish: to be locked away during the next full moon to prove his story true. The officials agreed, partly out of curiosity and partly out of fear. That night, the guards claimed they heard horrific sounds coming from his cell: growls, bones cracking, chains rattling. When they opened the door at dawn, Hans was dead. His body lay twisted, his mouth filled with his own blood. But one detail chilled them all. The cell walls were clawed, deep and fresh, as if made by something far larger than a man. The townspeople buried him at a crossroads, driving an iron stake through his chest to keep him from returning. Yet for years after, shepherds swore that a massive gray wolf prowled the grave at night. They called it the butcher's ghost, a reminder that hunger, once awakened, never truly dies. While witch trials burned across Europe, the forests of Estonia were haunted by something darker, not witches, but wolves in human form. Between the 16th and 17th centuries, dozens stood accused not of witchcraft, but of turning into wolves to murder, feast, and serve dark powers. These became known as the wolf trials, and they revealed a terrifying intersection between myth, religion, and human cruelty. The most famous of these trials occurred in 1691, in the rural parish of Kadrina. It began when a farmer's livestock was found slaughtered, their throats torn out and organs missing. Witnesses claimed to have seen a man crawling on all fours, running into the woods, and returning naked before dawn. When authorities captured him, a young shepherd named Hans the Wolf, his confession shocked the court. Hans admitted that 3 years earlier, the devil had taken him into the forest, where he had been anointed with wolf's fat and given the ability to transform. Under the full moon, he claimed, he and others would become wolves and hunt alongside spirits. He spoke of tearing apart animals and humans alike, driven by a hunger he could not resist. But there was something strange about Hans's confession. He spoke of his transformation not as an evil act, but as something natural, inevitable. He insisted he was no servant of Satan. "We do not serve the devil," he told the judge. "We only hunt as wolves do." The court, of course, refused to believe such a thing. To them, only the devil could grant such power. Hans was executed by beheading, his body burned, his ashes scattered across the fields. But his was not the only case. In 1640, 2 men and a woman were tried in the district of Gévaudan for lycanthropy. They confessed that during the Yule season, they joined a pack of wolves that entered the spirit world to battle witches who stole the crops. Their stories were eerily similar to those of the Livonian Hounds of God, suggesting a shared, older belief that still lingered among the rural folk, that some werewolves were not cursed, but chosen. These beliefs likely descended from ancient pagan shamanic traditions. The wolf was a sacred symbol, a guide between life and death, man and spirit. When Christianity spread through the Baltic, such traditions were demonized. The wolf spirits became servants of Satan, and those who spoke of them were branded heretics. By the late 1600s, the Estonian wolf trials had claimed dozens of lives. Villagers whispered that the forests themselves were cursed, that the souls of executed werewolves roamed the trees, howling for vengeance. Even centuries later, stories persisted. Hunters spoke of strange footprints that appeared only during winter, human one moment, wolf the next. Some claimed to hear voices in the wind chanting, howling, as though the old rites had never truly ended. To this day, locals in rural Estonia still warn travelers, never mock the wolf, for it may be listening. And when the snow falls deep and the moon rises bright, some say the ancient pack still runs their howls, echoing the cries of those who died for being both beast and believer. In 1685, the quiet German town of Ansbach was seized by terror. Livestock were slaughtered, children vanished, and travelers were found mutilated near the woods. The people spoke in fearful tones of a monstrous creature, a wolf of enormous size, with a taste for human flesh. But as the killings continued, suspicion turned towards something or someone far more sinister. Whispers began to spread that the beast was not a natural wolf at all, but the reincarnated spirit of the town's recently deceased mayor, a man hated for his cruelty. In life, he had been a tyrant, known for harsh taxes, unjust punishments, and the suffering he brought upon the poor. When he died suddenly, few mourned him. Yet only days after his burial, the first attack occurred. Witnesses described a wolf larger than any they'd ever seen, its fur dark and matted, its eyes gleaming with intelligence. It seemed to stalk its victims deliberately, favoring those who had once served the mayor or opposed him. Some claimed it even wore a strange ruff of fur around its neck, eerily reminiscent of the mayor's signature collar. The killings escalated. Panic gripped Ansbach. The people believed the mayor's wicked soul had returned in the form of a werewolf to exact vengeance from beyond the grave. The church called for prayer, while hunters took to the woods armed with silver bullets and crosses. After weeks of relentless pursuit, the beast was finally cornered near a mill. It took over a dozen musket shots to bring it down. When the hunters dragged its carcass into town, the people recoiled. Its jaws were enormous, and its paws almost human-like. To ensure the creature's evil would not rise again, they decided to make an example of it. In a grim display, the The wolf's body was dressed in human clothes, a wig, gloves, and even a mask made to resemble the dead mayor's face. The townsfolk paraded it through the streets, jeering and cursing the monster that had haunted them. Then they hung the carcass from a gibbet in the town square for all to see. The sight of the hanging werewolf brought both relief and unease. The killing stopped, but many wondered whether the creature had truly been the vengeful spirit of the mayor or something else that had chosen his likeness as a cruel mockery. Some claimed that on quiet nights, they still heard a low growl from beneath the gallows, as though the beast resented its humiliation. Historians later suggested that the Ansbach werewolf may have been a particularly large wolf, or even a human murderer using superstition to mask his crimes. But to the people of 17th century Ansbach, there was no question. Evil had taken the form of a beast, and for once, they had managed to destroy it. Still, the legend endures as a chilling reminder of how fear can blur the line between justice and vengeance. Because in Ansbach, they didn't just slay a monster, they created one. In 1598, the French city of Chalon-sur-Marne was shaken by a series of brutal murders so horrifying that even hardened soldiers refused to patrol the streets at night. Children vanished from fields, travelers were found half-eaten, and villagers whispered that a monstrous wolf stalked the countryside. Yet, when the creature was finally captured, the horror deepened, for it was not a wolf they brought to trial, but a man. His name was Jean Grenier, though some accounts call him the Wolf of Chalons. He was a drifter, a quiet, pale-faced man who often muttered to himself and avoided sunlight. The first reports began when several shepherd children were attacked near the river. Survivors spoke of a beast that leapt from the shadows, its eyes glowing red, its teeth long as a dagger's blade. But when the creature was wounded and fled, a blood trail led not into the forest, but to Grenier's small hut. When arrested, Grenier did not deny the charges. In fact, he smiled. Before a stunned courtroom, he confessed that he was indeed a werewolf, that the devil himself had gifted him a wolf's pelt when he was 13. With it, he said, he could roam the forests as a beast, feeding on flesh. He described his victims in disturbing detail, how he stalked them silently, how the change overtook him like a fever, how he would taste their fear before tearing into them. But what horrified the court most was not his confession, it was his calmness. Grenier seemed utterly convinced of his curse. When asked why he killed, he answered softly, "Because I am hungry, and the hunger is never gone." Inquisitors believed him possessed or insane. Witnesses testify that Grenier was often seen wandering at night, muttering to unseen companions and howling under the moon. But others, including physicians, argued that his mind was merely fractured, that his curse was madness, not magic. Still, his crimes could not be ignored. In an extraordinary decision, Grenier was not executed but confined to a monastery for the rest of his life. The monks who cared for him wrote that he would crawl on all fours, gnaw at his food, and snarl at his reflection. When he died years later, his body was buried outside consecrated ground, for fear that even in death, the wolf might return. The story of the Wolf of Chalons blurred the line between supernatural horror and the birth of psychology. For centuries, his case was cited as proof that lycanthropy was not always the devil's work, but perhaps a disease of the mind, a madness that made men believe themselves beasts. Yet some locals still whisper that the monks were wrong, that Grenier's wolf form never truly left him. Travelers near Chalons claim that on foggy nights, they see a pale figure moving between the trees, its eyes glowing faintly red. And when they hear the low growl that follows, they walk faster. In the quiet French town of Poligny, nestled among the Jura Mountains, the year 1521 became one of blood and terror. What began as whispers of missing travelers soon turned into one of the most infamous trials in European history. The case of the Werewolf of Poligny, a story so gruesome it blurred the line between murder, madness, and the supernatural. It all began when a woodcutter stumbled upon a mangled corpse near the forest edge. The victim's limbs had been torn apart, and claw marks were carved deep into the flesh. Locals believed it to be the work of wolves, But then another body was found, this time with signs of human interference. The terror grew when witnesses claimed to have seen a large wolf-like creature wearing tattered clothing, its snout stained with blood. Soon, 2 men were arrested, Pierre Bergot and Michel Verdun. Under torture, their confessions would become the foundation of one of the most horrifying werewolf legends ever told. Bergot claimed that years earlier, during a storm, he met 3 mysterious horsemen dressed in black. They promised him protection and prosperity if he renounced God and swore loyalty to the Lord of the Forest. When Bergot agreed, they marked him with a clawed hand and gave him an ointment that, when rubbed on his skin, would turn him into a wolf. He said Verdun had done the same, and together they hunted at night not for animals, but for humans. Verdun's confession was even darker. He described running through the woods on 4 legs, his senses heightened, his body covered in fur. He admitted to attacking women and children, claiming that the hunger was uncontrollable, that once he smelled blood, the beast within took over completely. He and Bergot told the court they met others like themselves, an entire pack of men who transformed beneath the full moon. When villagers searched the woods near their homes, they found remains, bones, torn clothing, and bloodied scraps that seemed to confirm their ghastly claims. The court condemned them both to death. Before their execution, priests demanded they repent. Bergot wept and begged for forgiveness, but Verdun simply laughed. He told the crowd that his master would come for him soon, that the hunt never ends. Both men were burned alive in the town square as the people of Poligny prayed for deliverance from evil. Historians later debated whether Bergot and Verdun were truly madmen or victims of mass hysteria. Some believed their confessions were born from torture. Others pointed out that the murders ceased only after their deaths, and that more than one witness had seen enormous wolves prowling the outskirts of town the night before they were captured. The legend of the werewolf of Poligny endures because it feels too detailed to be invention, too horrific to be mere myth. The story reveals something primal about fear itself, that when evil wears both a man's face and a wolf's hunger, no one can tell which side is more human. And when the moon rose again over Poligny, some swore they heard a howl from the ashes of the pyre, the final cry of a curse that refused to die. Far to the north of Scotland, where the winds of the North Sea bite and the heather bends under icy rain, lies Caithness, a land of desolation and legend. In the late 1700s, the people of this rugged coast spoke in fearful whispers about the Beast, a monstrous creature said to roam the moors by night, leaving only blood and bones in its wake. It began with the sheep. Farmers awoke to find their flocks torn apart, not devoured like a wolf's prey, but mutilated throats slashed, bellies ripped open, organs scattered in grotesque patterns. Then came the missing children. 2 boys vanished while herding near the hills, and when a search party was sent out, all they found were shreds of clothing, soaked with blood, and tracks massive paw prints too large for any dog, yet too irregular for a wolf. The villagers grew desperate. Rumors spread that it wasn't an animal at all, but a man cursed by the devil. Some claimed to have seen him, a huge figure covered in fur, walking upright under the moonlight, his eyes burning like fire. Those who lived long enough to tell their stories described the same haunting sound, a low, guttural growl that made the air itself seem to shiver. The local magistrate sent out hunters, armed with silver bullets and holy relics. They searched for days, following the tracks across moor and marsh, until one night they heard a howl so piercing it froze them in place. The dogs turned and fled, whining in terror. Out of the fog, they saw it, a hulking silhouette with long, shaggy limbs crouched over a fresh kill. When the creature raised its head, its muzzle was smeared with blood, and its teeth glistened in the moonlight. The hunters fired. The beast shrieked and fled into the mist, leaving behind a trail of crimson. When they followed it at dawn, the prince led to a small croft on the edge of town, the home of Angus MacLeod, a solitary shepherd known for his temper and his reclusive habits. Inside, they found him wounded, a gunshot to his shoulder, and his clothes shredded. His hands were torn and bloodied, his fingernails cracked and blackened, as if he had clawed at something for hours. MacLeod swore he was innocent, but the villagers had already made up their minds. When they bound him in the square, the old women made the sign of the cross, and the men spat on the ground. That night, under a full moon, Angus began to scream, his body twisting, his bones cracking. Witnesses said his eyes rolled back and his teeth lengthened into fangs. The priests called it the devil's work, but by the time they approached, the man was gone. Only the ropes remained torn apart, as if by a beast's claws. The killing stopped soon after, but travelers in Caithness still whisper of a shape that prowls the cliffs on stormy nights. When the wind howls across the moors, some say it's not the sea you he. In the Bavarian town of Ansbach, Germany, the year 1685 marked the birth of a nightmare that blurred the lines between superstition, vengeance, and the supernatural. It began with the death of a hated man, the town's cruel mayor, whose corruption had brought suffering to nearly every villager. When he died suddenly, the people rejoiced, but their relief was short-lived. Soon after his burial, strange reports began to circulate. A massive wolf was seen prowling the outskirts of the town, a beast larger than any known in Bavaria. It moved with uncanny intelligence, avoiding traps and guards, and it seemed to appear only where fear lingered the strongest. Livestock were slaughtered in the fields, children vanished near the woods, and one farmer swore that the creature had stood on two legs and laughed before disappearing into the night. Whispers began. The mayor has returned. The townsfolk convinced themselves that the wicked man had been reborn as a werewolf, cursed for his sins. They said the devil had sent him back to torment the living. Fear became frenzy. Every howl at night sent villagers fleeing into their homes, clutching crosses and lighting candles to ward off evil. Determined to end the terror, the local hunters set traps and patrolled the forest. Weeks passed before they finally caught sight of the beast, a massive, gray wolf with eyes that gleamed like fire. It fought with a ferocity beyond comprehension, but a well-aimed shot from a musket pierced its side. The wolf staggered, howled in fury, and collapsed. When they brought its body back to town, something strange happened. As they laid the creature on the ground, the villagers gasped. Its fur began to thin, and the shape beneath looked disturbingly human. The face of the dead mayor, they said, glared back at them for a fleeting moment before fading. The people, both terrified and triumphant, decided the creature's death was not enough. They dressed the wolf's corpse in human clothing, put a judge's wig on its head, and hung it by the neck in the town square as a warning to all who might consort with evil. Some say they even built a mock courthouse for the trial, condemning the beast spirit to eternal damnation before burning the remains to ash. But the story didn't end there. Weeks later, reports surfaced from nearby villages. A second wolf had appeared, smaller, but with the same fiery eyes. It was said to haunt the same paths, circling the ruins of the mayor's old estate. Farmers claimed it didn't kill for food, it killed for revenge. And each time it was seen, the air filled with the stench of sulfur, as if something infernal had risen again. To this day, the people of Ansbach whisper that the curse never truly lifted. On certain nights, when the fog rolls through the valley and the church bells toll, a shadow moves between the graves, a shape that looks both man and beast, neither living nor dead. The witch and the wolf, they call it two forces, bound together by hatred, death, and the unending hunger of a soul that refused to rest. In the Bavarian town of Ansbach, Germany, the year 1685 marked the birth of a nightmare that blurred the lines between superstition, vengeance, and the supernatural. It began with the death of a hated man, the town's cruel mayor, whose corruption had brought suffering to nearly every villager. When he died suddenly, the people rejoiced, but their relief was short-lived. Soon after his burial, strange reports began to circulate. A massive wolf was seen prowling the outskirts of the town, a beast larger than any known in Bavaria. It moved with uncanny intelligence, avoiding traps and guards, and it seemed to appear only where fear lingered the strongest. Livestock were slaughtered in the fields, children vanished near the woods, and one farmer swore that the creature had stood on two legs and laughed before disappearing into the night. Whispers began. The mayor has returned. The townsfolk convinced themselves that the wicked man had been reborn as a werewolf, cursed for his sins. They said the devil had sent him back to torment the living. Fear became frenzy. Every howl at night sent villagers fleeing into their homes, clutching crosses and lighting candles to ward off evil. Determined to end the terror, the local hunters set traps and patrolled the forest. Weeks passed before they finally caught sight of the beast, a massive, gray wolf with eyes that gleamed like fire. It fought with a ferocity beyond comprehension, but a well-aimed shot from a musket pierced its side. The wolf staggered, howled in fury, and collapsed. When they brought its body back to town, something strange happened. As they laid the creature on the ground, the villagers gasped. Its fur began to thin, and the shape beneath looked disturbingly human. The face of the dead mayor, they said, glared back at them for a fleeting moment before fading. The people, both terrified and triumphant, decided the creature's death was not enough. They dressed the wolf's corpse in human clothing, put a judge's wig on its head, and hung it by the neck in the town square as a warning to all who might consort with evil. Some say they even built a mock courthouse for the trial, condemning the beast spirit to eternal damnation before burning the remains to ash. But the story didn't end there. Weeks later, reports surfaced from nearby villages. A second wolf had appeared, smaller, but with the same fiery eyes. It was said to haunt the same paths, circling the ruins of the mayor's old estate. Farmers claimed it didn't kill for food, it killed for revenge. And each time it was seen, the air filled with the stench of sulfur, as if something infernal had risen again. To this day, the people of Ansbach whisper that the curse never truly lifted. On certain nights, when the fog rolls through the valley and the church bells toll, a shadow moves between the graves, a shape that looks both man and beast, neither living nor dead. The witch and the wolf, they call it two forces, bound together by hatred, death, and the unending hunger of a soul that refuse to rest. Deep in the heart of eastern France lies the Vosges Mountains, a landscape of dense forests, winding rivers, and fog that clings like a shroud. It is a place of beauty by day and of fear by night. In the late 18th century, this region became the setting of one of the strangest and most terrifying legends ever recorded, the wild men of the Vosges. For generations, shepherds told stories of creatures that lived beyond the ridges, not quite men, not quite beasts. Covered in hair, moving silently through the trees, they were said to emerge only during storms or under the light of the full moon. But in 1788, the tales turned into terror when the attacks began. A farmer's daughter disappeared one night while gathering water. Her body was found the next morning, mutilated, her throat torn open, her bones broken as if by enormous strength. 2 days later, a young boy was dragged from a stable. All that was left behind were footprints, enormous, bare, and deep, as though made by something neither animal nor man. Panic spread through the villages of the Vosges. Hunters scoured the mountains, believing wolves to be responsible, but the tracks told a different story. These prints walked upright in pairs, and sometimes they found claw marks in the trees, as if the creatures had climbed to watch from above. Witnesses spoke of shadows gliding through the mist, of low growls echoing across the valleys. Then came the encounter that cemented the legend. A group of woodcutters, armed with torches and axes, ventured deep into the forest after hearing strange cries. They stumbled upon a clearing, and there, crouched over a carcass, was a figure covered in thick, matted fur. Its arms were human-like, but unnaturally long, its hands ending in black claws. When it turned its head, the men saw its face, half human, half wolf, with eyes that burned yellow in the firelight. The creature roared and lunged. One man was killed instantly. Another barely escaped, claw marks raking his chest. The survivors swore that as they fled, they saw two more shapes moving behind the first, the wild men, hunting as a pack. The French authorities launched a hunt, fearing a gang of murderers or deranged hermits. They scoured the mountain passes, and after weeks of searching, they captured one, a man, filthy and feral, his body scarred, his nails thick like claws. He spoke little but claimed he had run with the wolves. He said the mountains belonged to them now, to the Brothers of the Moon. He died before the truth could be extracted. Some said from sickness, others from a wound inflicted by silver. His body was buried in secret, and the case was quietly closed. But the forests of the Vosges still hold their secrets. Hunters still whisper of shapes that move upright among the trees. Some say the wild men were cursed remnants of an ancient clan who made a pact with the darkness to survive. Others believe they were simply beasts that learned to become men. And when the wind howls through the mountains at night, locals still cross themselves, for in that lonely song, they swear they can hear voices, not wolves, not men, but something in between. The chilling forests of Livonia, now modern-day Latvia and Estonia, were home to one of the most unsettling cases of lycanthropy in Northern Europe. Unlike other stories rooted in superstition or rumor, the Werewolf of Livonia left behind records, confessions, and a trail of terror that historians still debate today. The year was 1651, and the villages along the Daugava River were gripped by fear. Sheep, cattle, and even humans were found mauled in the most grotesque ways. Limbs torn, throats ripped, faces left barely recognizable. Locals swore that a single creature was responsible. A monstrous wolf that could walk like a man, vanish at will, and strike with uncanny intelligence. Authorities arrested a man named John Perrin, a poor woodsman known for his quiet, reclusive life on the forest's edge. Villagers accused him of the attacks, claiming they had seen him wandering at night near the slaughtered livestock. Under interrogation and torture, John confessed. But his words were not those of a common criminal. They told of a curse, a pact, and a double life. John claimed that one night, while walking in the forest, he encountered a figure cloaked in black, a spirit or demon. He couldn't be sure. The entity offered him power, the ability to assume the form of a wolf, to travel unseen, and to hunt as no human could. In return, he would owe service, and every full moon he would take life to honor his master. He admitted to transforming, describing the change in horrifying detail. Bones snapped, muscles shifted, and fur erupted from his body. He would run on all fours, his senses sharpened beyond comprehension. Hunger would overtake reason, compelling him to attack animals and occasionally humans to sustain the beast within. Yet, John insisted he was not evil by choice. He said the spirit controlled him, and he was powerless once the transformation began. He described the fear of waking in the forest, covered in blood, not knowing whose lives he had taken. His confession included precise locations of victims, tracks only a wolf could make, and encounters with other werewolves men similarly cursed, forming secret pacts that roamed the Livonian wilderness. The court found him guilty of murder and witchcraft. He was executed publicly, burned to ashes, his body buried in unconsecrated ground to prevent the wolf from returning. Yet the attacks did not immediately cease, leading some to believe the pack still roamed, perhaps led by John's spirit, or by other cursed men like him. Even today, Livonia's forests retain their dark reputation. Shepherds still speak of wolf-like figures moving upright in the shadows. Hikers report hearing human-like growls echoing through the trees at night, and locals avoid certain paths during full moons. The Werewolf of Livonia remains a haunting reminder that sometimes the line between man and beast is not a matter of myth, but of terrifying reality, and that curses, once begun, may never truly end. In the forests of Saxe-Coburg, Germany, during the mid-1700s, villagers whispered about a creature so terrifying that parents forbade their children from leaving the house after sunset. Known simply as the Beast of Saxe-Coburg, this wolf-like terror terrorized the region for months, leaving behind a trail of mutilated livestock and terrified villagers. The first attack occurred in the winter of 1753. A shepherd tending his flock reported seeing a massive gray wolf with eyes like burning embers. It moved unnaturally crouched low one moment, standing on hind legs the next, leaping across fences with impossible agility. The shepherd barely escaped with his life, but his sheep were found slaughtered in a manner that suggested intelligence beyond a normal predator. Soon, human victims were discovered. Children and the elderly were found dead near the woods, their throats torn out. Witnesses described hearing unearthly growls, almost like a human voice distorted by animalistic fury. The people of Saxe-Coburg began to panic, certain that a werewolf walked among them. Authorities arrested a man named Konrad Loeffler, a recluse, living at the forest's edge. Neighbors reported he had strange habits, roaming at night, disappearing during full moons, and speaking to animals as if they understood him. Under interrogation and under threat of torture, Loeffler confessed. He claimed that he had discovered an ancient ointment in the ruins of a church, a formula that allowed a man to take the shape of a wolf. Once transformed, he could move faster, hear farther, and smell the fear of his victims. He admitted to attacking both livestock and humans, driven by an insatiable hunger that took over his mind when the moon was high. Loeffler's confession detailed his experiences in the forest. He spoke of how he would stalk villages silently, how he sensed the exact moment a child strayed from safety, and how the thrill of the hunt was like a fire he could not quench. He also described encounters with other men who had mastered the wolf form, forming secret packs that roamed the Saxe-Coburg forests, hunting as wolves and men simultaneously. The court found him guilty of murder and lycanthropy, the first case in the region to officially recognize a man as a werewolf. Loeffler was executed in the town square, his body torn and burned to prevent the spirit of the wolf from returning. Despite the execution, the fear lingered. Villagers claimed to hear howls at night for years afterward, especially during the full moon. Shepherds avoided the forest at all costs, and many believed the other wolfmen described by Loeffler still roamed, hidden, waiting for the right time to strike again. The Beast of Saxe-Coburg stands as a testament to a time when the boundary between man and monster was not only feared, but recorded a legend of horror that shaped the folklore of Germany for centuries to come. In the heart of Anjou, France, near the city of Angers, the year 1520 witnessed one of the most gruesome werewolf cases in French history. Villagers spoke in hushed tones of a man who walked as a man by day, but transformed into a wolf by night, leaving a path of terror across the countryside. This was the story of Gilles Garnier, a man whose deeds would become synonymous with true horror. Garnier was a respected hunter and trapper, living on the outskirts of Angers. Yet rumors circulated about his strange behavior. He avoided company, roamed the woods at night, and spoke of the beast within that demanded blood. In December 1573, these rumors turned into a nightmare. A young child vanished near the forest, her body later found torn apart. Within weeks, 2 more children disappeared under similarly brutal circumstances. The townspeople panicked. Witnesses claimed to have seen a wolf standing upright, with piercing eyes, prowling the woods. The creature seemed intelligent, almost cunning, and appeared to seek out its victims deliberately rather than at random. When authorities investigated, they discovered a trail of clues that pointed to Garnier, his footprints near the crime scenes, torn clothing from the victims, and witnesses who swore they saw him transform under the full moon. Garnier initially denied all charges. However, under interrogation and torture, he confessed in horrifying detail. He claimed he had made a pact with the devil, who anointed him with an ointment that allowed him to assume the form of a wolf. In this state, he admitted, he would hunt children to feed the beast, claiming that the hunger was uncontrollable and would seize him until he had taken life. He described the transformation vividly. His body would contort, his bones cracking, fur sprouting from his skin, and his mind overtaken by a feral instinct. The court found Garnier guilty of murder and lycanthropy. On the 18th of January 1574, he was executed in front of the people of Angers. His punishment was brutal. He was strangled, his body burned, and the ashes scattered to prevent any return of the wolf spirit. The execution served as both punishment and warning, a chilling demonstration of the supposed consequences of making pacts with the devil. Yet the legend did not end with his death. Locals swore they could hear howls echoing through the forests, warning children to stay away. Garnier's tale became a cornerstone of French werewolf lore, illustrating the terrifying intersection of superstition, real crime, and the supernatural. The Werewolf of Angers stands as a stark reminder that sometimes monsters are not merely imagined. In the forests of Anjou, and in the minds of those who lived through the terror, the line between man and beast had been horrifyingly and fatally crossed. Years after the infamous Wolf of Ansbach had been executed and the town thought itself safe, strange events began anew. It was 1695, a decade after the original terror, and the forests surrounding Ansbach were once again shrouded in fear. Livestock were slaughtered, children vanished from their homes, and villagers swore they heard a familiar guttural howl echoing across the hills. The people were terrified that the original wolf had returned, or worse, that its curse had passed to another. This time, suspicion fell on Konrad Seiler, a local hunter known for his nocturnal expeditions. He had been seen wandering the woods during the full moon, carrying knives and wearing an old wolfskin coat rumored to have belonged to the first wolf's execution site. On several nights, witnesses claimed to see a wolf-like figure moving on two legs, crouching low to the ground, then standing upright with unnatural speed. Its eyes glowed bright yellow, and its howl carried a resonance that sent dogs barking and villagers shivering. Unlike ordinary wolves, it avoided traps and ambushes, as if it understood human strategy. Konrad was arrested after a young shepherd survived an attack, leaving a trail of bloody footprints leading to his cabin. Under questioning, he confessed, but his admission was chilling. He claimed that he had discovered a fragment of the original wolf's remains buried beneath the execution pyre. Through an ancient ritual, he had absorbed the beast's power, granting him strength, agility, and the hunger of the wolf. He described the transformation in horrifying detail. His muscles would twist, his bones elongate, and fur would erupt across his body. Once changed, he said, he could hear the heartbeats of those nearby and track them across vast distances. Hunger overcame his mind, compelling him to hunt, to kill, and to feel the primal ecstasy of predation. Despite his confession, authorities were skeptical that such a transformation was possible, attributing his actions to madness or cunning disguise. Nevertheless, they sentenced Konrad to execution, burning him alive to ensure that no trace of the wolf's power remained. Villagers prayed that the curse had finally ended. Yet, legends persisted. Shepherds in the surrounding forests claimed to see a large, shadowy wolf prowling near the hills even after Konrad's death. Some said it was the original Wolf of Ansbach, returned to claim vengeance. Others whispered that the curse was eternal, bound to the town itself, a darkness that could never be fully extinguished. The return of the Wolf of Ansbach cemented the town's place in werewolf history. It was not simply a tale of man or beast, but a story of curses passed down, of evil inherited, and of fear so palpable that even rational minds trembled. Even today, during full moons, locals swear that the forests of Ansbach still echo with howls, a haunting reminder that some monsters, once born, never truly die. Years after the infamous Wolf of Ansbach had been executed and the town thought itself safe, strange events began anew. It was 1695, a decade after the original terror, and the forests surrounding Ansbach were once again shrouded in fear. Livestock were slaughtered, children vanished from their homes, and villagers swore they heard a familiar guttural howl echoing across the hills. The people were terrified that the original wolf had returned, or worse, that its curse had passed to another. This time, suspicion fell on Konrad Seiler, a local hunter known for his nocturnal expeditions. He had been seen wandering the woods during the full moon, carrying knives and wearing an old wolfskin coat rumored to have belonged to the first wolf's execution site. On several nights, witnesses claimed to see a wolf-like figure moving on two legs, crouching low to the ground, then standing upright with unnatural speed. Its eyes glowed bright yellow, and its howl carried a resonance that sent dogs barking and villagers shivering. Unlike ordinary wolves, it avoided traps and ambushes, as if it understood human strategy. Konrad was arrested after a young shepherd survived an attack, leaving a trail of bloody footprints leading to his cabin. Under questioning, he confessed, but his admission was chilling. He claimed that he had discovered a fragment of the original wolf's remains buried beneath the execution pyre. Through an ancient ritual, he had absorbed the beast's power, granting him strength, agility, and the hunger of the wolf. He described the transformation in horrifying detail. His muscles would twist, his bones elongate, and fur would erupt across his body. Once changed, he said, he could hear the heartbeats of those nearby and track them across vast distances. Hunger overcame his mind, compelling him to hunt, to kill, and to feel the primal ecstasy of predation. Despite his confession, authorities were skeptical that such a transformation was possible, attributing his actions to madness or cunning disguise. Nevertheless, they sentenced Conrad to execution, burning him alive to ensure that no trace of the wolf's power remained. Villagers prayed that the curse had finally ended. Yet, legends persisted. Shepherds in the surrounding forests claimed to see a large, shadowy wolf prowling near the hills even after Conrad's death. Some said it was the original wolf of Ansbach, returned to claim vengeance. Others whispered that the curse was eternal, bound to the town itself, a darkness that could never be fully extinguished. The return of the Wolf of Ansbach cemented the town's place in werewolf history. It was not simply a tale of man or beast, but a story of curses passed down, of evil inherited, and of fear so palpable that even rational minds trembled. Even today, during full moons, locals swear that the forests of Ansbach still echo with howls, a haunting reminder that some monsters, once born, never truly die. In the dense forests and rolling hills of 17th century Hungary, tales of werewolves were more than superstition. They were warnings, whispered from village to village. Unlike isolated cases in France or Germany, Hungary's legends describe entire packs of men cursed to roam the night as wolves, striking terror into both rural communities and traveling merchants. The most infamous series of attacks occurred in 1690, centered around the small town of Nograd. Livestock were found shredded beyond recognition. Families vanished in the dead of night, and travelers returning from the markets spoke of shadows that moved unnaturally, their eyes glowing like lanterns in the darkness. Villagers began to avoid the forests entirely, leaving crops to rot and animals unfed. Suspicion fell upon a few local men who were known to act strangely during full moons. One of them, Miklos Kovacs, had been accused of witchcraft years prior but was never convicted. Locals reported seeing him vanish into the woods at night, only to return with scratches and dirt-stained clothing. Under the threat of torture, Miklos confessed to a horrifying truth. He and several others had been cursed, or perhaps chosen, to serve as wolves of the devil. Miklos described the transformation in gruesome detail. His body would elongate, his teeth sharpen, and fur would cover his skin. During the change, he lost control over his mind. The wolf inside him dictated his actions. Hunger was relentless, not just for animals, but for human flesh. He spoke of hunting in packs, coordinated strikes, and evading capture with unnatural cunning. Other villagers, he claimed, were part of the same secret order, and together they were bound by rituals older than Christianity itself. Authorities responded with brutal measures. Suspected werewolves were arrested, tortured, and executed to prevent further attacks. Some historians believe this purge contributed to ending the killings, while others argue the pack simply moved to neighboring regions. Nonetheless, the fear persisted. Farmers still reported sightings of enormous wolves, moving upright and striking with strategy, leading many to believe that the curse of the wolf was not fully broken. What makes the Hungarian cases particularly chilling is the suggestion of organization and intelligence. Unlike the random attacks elsewhere, these werewolves appeared to plan their hunts, target vulnerable victims, and retreat before discovery. This level of cunning blurred the line between human and beast, making it impossible for villagers to know whether the threat was supernatural or simply human malevolence amplified by fear. Even today, Hungary's forests retain an eerie reputation. Locals caution travelers to avoid the woods during full moons, telling stories of men who disappear only to return as something inhuman. The werewolves of Hungary remain a haunting testament to a time when folklore, fear, and reality intertwined, and when the forests seemed alive with creatures that could be both man and monster. In the rolling hills of Luxembourg, near the village of Clairvaux, A series of attacks in the 18th century gave rise to one of the most enduring werewolf legends in the region, the Beast of Clairvaux. Unlike other cases, this terror was as much psychological as it was physical, spreading fear that permeated every household, market, and church. It began quietly. Farmers discovered their sheep torn apart in the fields, their throats ripped and bodies mangled. Villagers assumed wolves were responsible until humans began disappearing. Children vanished while playing near the forest edge, and young women were found savagely attacked, their injuries too precise, too deliberate, to be caused by ordinary animals. The townspeople spoke of a figure moving with uncanny speed, often seen standing upright, covered in thick, matted fur. Its eyes glowed with unnatural intelligence, and its howl carried a sinister cadence that seemed almost like speech. Fear escalated, and the villagers began locking doors at dusk, refusing to venture outside after dark. Suspicion soon fell upon Matthias Becker, a quiet, eccentric man who lived alone near the forest. Locals claimed he had strange habits, leaving his house at night, wandering barefoot in the snow, and talking to shadows. Authorities interrogated him, and under pressure and torture, Becker confessed, but his story was far from ordinary. He claimed to have been marked by the devil after stumbling upon a hidden relic in the woods. This mark allowed him to transform into a wolf during the full moon, endowing him with strength, agility, and senses far beyond human limits. Once transformed, Becker said, he felt a hunger that could only be satisfied by the flesh of the innocent. He admitted to hunting alone at first, but later met other cursed men forming a small pack that coordinated attacks, always evading capture. The authorities found the confessions difficult to accept, attributing them to madness or the influence of superstition. Nevertheless, they executed Becker publicly, burning his body to ash to prevent the beast from returning. However, locals continued reporting sightings of wolf-like figures for decades afterward. Some believe the ritual had only destroyed Becker's earthly body, not the spirit of the beast. What makes the Beast of Clairvaux particularly terrifying is its blend of human intelligence and animal ferocity. Survivors described its ability to stalk silently, avoid hunters' traps, and strike precisely like a predator with human cunning. Its presence haunted the collective imagination of the region, becoming a cautionary tale for children and a warning to adults that darkness could hide in the most familiar places. Even centuries later, the forests around Clairvaux hold a reputation for mystery and fear. Travelers report hearing low growls in the shadows and glimpses of figures that vanish when approached. The legend of the Beast of Clairvaux reminds us that some monsters are not simply myth, they are the embodiment of fear itself, lurking in the dark where man and beast collide. By the late 17th and 18th centuries, reports of individual werewolves had evolved into terrifying accounts of entire packs, groups of men cursed to roam the night as wolf-like predators. Unlike solitary attacks, these packs acted with intelligence, coordination, and cunning, blurring the line between human crime and supernatural horror. Their story spread across Europe, leaving a legacy of fear that became impossible to ignore. One of the earliest documented packs was said to roam the forests of Transylvania. Farmers reported seeing several enormous wolves moving in unison, their eyes glowing in the moonlight. Sheep and cattle were found slaughtered in patterns that suggested careful planning, and some villagers claimed to see the beasts walking upright, speaking in guttural voices as if coordinating their hunts. Authorities attempted to investigate, but the pack always eluded capture. Survivors described a hierarchy within the group, a dominant figure who led the hunt, others who flanked prey, and younger wolves who carried out attacks under the leader's command. Witnesses claim that in some encounters, the wolves would even pretend to flee, only to ambush hunters or travelers moments later. In Hungary, a separate pack reportedly terrorized multiple villages over several months. Here, the werewolves were not only deadly hunters, but also ritualistic in their killings. Victims were often left in symbolic patterns, and villagers believed the attacks were meant to instill fear and reverence for dark powers. Survivors spoke of hearing voices human-like growls issuing commands, laughter that chilled the blood, and howls that sounded like warnings to the living. The psychological impact of these packs was devastating. Entire communities fled the forests, abandoned farmlands, and fortified villages. People feared the night, locking doors and carrying charms, crosses, and weapons in futile defense. The presence of multiple predators operating with intelligence made it impossible to feel safe. Even the bravest hunters often refused to pursue them. Authorities across Europe struggled to reconcile the evidence. Were these packs truly supernatural, or were they organized bands of humans using wolf disguises to cover murders and theft? The confessions of some captured werewolves suggested both human criminals who either genuinely believed they were cursed or exploited the superstition for their own gain. Yet even skeptics acknowledged one unnerving detail. The attacks stopped only after key pack members were executed, leaving an eerie sense that some supernatural truth might underlie the legends. The curse of the werewolf pack left a lasting mark on folklore, inspiring tales of coordinated lycanthropy that endure in literature and cinema. It demonstrates a terrifying possibility. When human cunning and wolf-like ferocity combine, monsters may not be solitary beasts, but entire communities of the damned, capable of haunting villages for months, even decades. Europe's forests and mountains, centuries later, still carry whispers of these packs. Some say the descendants of the cursed continue to roam, invisible yet present, leaving villagers to wonder if the curse is ever truly broken or if it simply sleeps, waiting for the next full moon. After centuries of terror, trials, and blood-soaked forests, the legend of the werewolf did not end with the last execution or the final howl echoing across Europe's mountains. Instead, it evolved, leaving a legacy that still haunts our collective imagination and blurs the line between history, folklore, and true horror. From the Werewolf of Bedburg to the Beast of Gévaudan, each story shared common threads. Men transformed into beasts, often by pact or curse, attacks that were both brutal and cunning, and communities gripped by fear that no authority could fully dispel. These tales reveal a primal truth. The terror of the werewolf was not just physical, but psychological. Entire villages were paralyzed by the possibility that the predator could be anyone hiding behind familiar faces during the day. The historical records, confessions, and eyewitness accounts tell of men whose powers, whether imagined, induced by superstition, or real, allowed them to surpass ordinary human limits. They could run faster, see farther, smell the faintest trace of blood, and strike with lethal precision. Survivors' testimonies describe creatures that were as intelligent as they were feral, capable of avoiding hunters, planning attacks, and instilling a deep, lingering dread. Yet beyond fear, these stories carried moral and societal warnings. Werewolves were often depicted as cursed individuals, punished for sins or association with evil. They reflected humanity's struggle with its darker impulses, aggression, jealousy, lust, and the hunger for dominance. In this sense, the werewolf was not merely a creature of folklore, but a mirror of our own potential for cruelty and savagery. The legacy extended beyond Europe. As stories spread, they inspired writers, artists, and later filmmakers, embedding the werewolf into popular culture. The myths transformed. Silver bullets, full moons, and packs of wolves became symbolic tools to explore fear, morality, and the duality of man. Modern horror still draws on these historical accounts, often echoing the original terror that haunted isolated villages where superstition and real danger merged into a nightmare. Some historians argue that many werewolf cases were exaggerated or products of hysteria, yet the sheer number of consistent accounts across centuries and regions suggests a deeper resonance. Perhaps the werewolf was never meant to be understood as a literal creature, but as a force, a representation of chaos, fear, and humanity's darker nature that demanded attention and caution. Even today, in the forests of Germany, France, Hungary, and beyond, locals tell stories of sightings, shadows, moving upright, eyes glinting in the moonlight, and the echo of a low growl. Whether these are the remnants of ancient curses, misunderstood animals, or simply the imagination fueled by centuries of tales, the message remains the same. Somewhere between man and beast lies a terrifying possibility. The legacy of the werewolves is not just in the legends themselves, but in the fear they inspire, the cautionary tales they leave, and the understanding that sometimes the monster is not merely in the forest, it may be in the heart of man himself.